Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Financial Insights right here on KIDO AM 63. We are your financial experts each and every day for providing the same thing. But today we're going to do it a little bit different. We're going to take you back to the basics. We're talking about financial foundations. You've heard Denise Winston on the program before. Her company name is Money Start Here. In fact, if you'd like to learn more, and you can even follow along with us at least a little bit by going to moneystarthere.com. Today, our subject matter, well, it's credit. Something we all use, we all have it, and do we need it? That's the question. We're going to start with Denise Winston, get all the answers to those questions and many, many more. We'll be talking about credit reporting agencies, how they calculate the scores, and then even new laws that are coming out as well. So we've got a lot to discuss. We're going to get right down to it. Denise, how's your day?
Oh, my day has been amazing. Hopefully everybody else's is too.
Awesome. Good. That's good. It keeps your energy high, right?
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Well, let's get started. When it comes to credit, a lot of people have had a lot of tough times here recently, and either they've allowed their credit to get injured, or maybe in some cases they've just disregarded it. They don't even know what's going on with it until they need it, and then there may be some surprises in there. Let's first talk a little bit about what credit is useful for. What do we use credit for these days?
Man, credit can be the three numbers that can really dictate your style of life. When you think about it, it can actually dictate whether or not you get your dream job. It can dictate whether or not you can buy the home you want, whether you can rent an apartment, what is the pricing on a car loan, whether you can get a credit card, what your insurance rates might be. It is amazing how many key factors are intertwined with your credit report. So I'm so happy you're covering this for your audience, because it is one of the most critical things that we can do, and one of the easiest ways that we can really help our financial life become much more healthy.
So not only does it affect your expenses going forward, but it might actually affect where you live, where you work. Ultimately, those things that you use to build your credit, which is income, you need to first have good credit to get the right income, right?
Right. And I often say that your credit score is the one thing that can either cost you or make you thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. And just a few simple educational pieces can really make all the difference in the world. And we get to cover them today.
Perfect. Well, let's start off with the basics, which is who keeps track of our credit and who submits that information and so on.
Well, this is probably the biggest misconception that most people have, is that your credit report is the same as your credit score, and that is absolutely not the case. So the first thing we want to do is we want to address that there are three different credit reporting agencies, and all they have is your report. When you get a loan from a financial institution, they basically send your information to either TransUnion, Equifax, or Experian, and they keep track of your lifelong credit history from the very first piece of credit that you get until today. And your credit score is managed and calculated by a company called FICO. And basically that score is a picture in time. But let's go back to something real quick. When you think about it, how do you start establishing credit? When you're 18 or whenever. I actually think you should get credit at a very young age, because you need a history, because when you walk into the bank and you're 25.
That's mostly when I discredited myself, but go ahead. Yeah.
When you're a teenager, you know everything anyway.
Yeah, right.
So just go straight to the head of the class.
Right.
But the very first piece of credit you're going to get is about $500. And then over time, they're going to slowly increase the amount of your line of credit. And each time you do that, either apply or they increase your line of credit, they give you a little bit more. So ultimately, you work yourself up to higher credit limits.
Let's say that you just start out at 18, you get your very first credit card, and it's got $500 limit on it. And let's say 3 months into it, whatever payments you've had, you made them all on time. What kind of score? Well, or maybe you should answer that later. I don't know, but you must start somewhere with a score, right?
You start basically with a clean slate.
So you got an 850, you're top.
Well, it's actually zero. There's no credit score until you start building a history.
Okay.
But we will cover that in detail later.
Okay, got it.
But going back to that same thought about graduating and earning the right to advance, each time a creditor or a financial institution extends you credit, they're testing you to see whether or not you can handle that amount of money. So ultimately, over time, you start at 500, you go to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Maybe you buy a used car for 5,000. Then that car breaks down, so you buy one for 15, and then you 25, and then by the time you're about 25, you met your significant other, dream soulmate, and you want to buy a house, and now you want a loan for $180,000 to buy a home. Well, if you don't have that history and you go to the bank, I was a banker for 25 years, you have to have demonstrated good, clean history in order for me to make you that loan. Make sense?
Absolutely, it does. So then so those companies that you've been taking credit at along the way are reporting it to Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. They're the recording companies. They're making a recording about you and your life, and then
And issuing in a report. So if you think about it as your report card on credit, it's a great way to think about it. So you're exactly right.
so the same companies that participate in submitting the information are also likely the same companies that are requesting the information about a new borrower.
No, not necessarily. Maybe I misunderstood. Basically, what happens is if you get a loan with a national bank and it's a car loan,
Right.
and you get a loan for $20,000 to buy a car, that immediately gets reported to your credit report along with what the due date is and what the payment is. And every time you make that payment, it is reported.
Right.
Then what happens? So just keep in mind there's three different credit reporting agencies, and they were Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.
Right.
The financial institution may or may not report to all three, and this is where it gets very confusing. The three credit reports do not talk to one another. So just because information is on one credit reporting agency, it may not be on the other. And this is where we can definitely simplify this for them just by making this demonstration.
I see it, but I guess my point is that let's say it's Bank of America that you establish your first credit card with, and then they're reporting to, let's say, Equifax how you're paying on that debt,
Right.
and then it might be Bank of America that is going to go back to Equifax 5 years later when you want to borrow money for a car because they want to see, hey, did this person extend credit with other lenders, and how did they do with those other lenders?
Yes, you're exactly right.
Okay. So once that information is consolidated by these credit reporting agencies, then you get a FICO score from FICO company, right?
Right.
Okay.
And two things. You can go to annualcreditreport.com and you can actually get a copy once a year free from each one of the credit reporting agencies. And to calculate your FICO, going forward with what you're saying, is that information submits from the credit reporting agency to FICO, and they take all of that data and basically massage it and spit out a score.
I see.
So your credit report and your score are two different things, and your credit score ranges from 300 to 850. And you really want a higher score because that is what the banks use to dictate what your credit terms are going to be, what your credit worthiness is, and whether or not they're going to give you the loan ultimately.
I see. Perfect. Okay, so my FICO how do they make money?
Well, the interesting thing is you can get a free copy of your credit report once a year from annualcreditreport.com. However, it does not come with your score. You have to pay for your score.
So two separate things. You've got your credit history, and then you have your credit score.
Exactly.
Okay. So where do you get your credit histories from? What was it?
You can go to annualcreditreport.com to get once a year. And I actually choose January to do my financial checkup. And every year I pull each one of those, go over it with a fine-tooth comb, make sure I dispute any information, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And I don't really care about what my score is unless I'm planning on a purchase because I manage my score very, very carefully. You may choose to buy your score. You can also buy it on that same website. But the great thing is with this new legislation that's coming through, it was the Credit Card Protection Act of 2009. You've heard that cute commercial for freecreditreport.com?
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Well,
I love their songs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great ad campaign, but there's going to be some things that are coming down so that they are not going to be so easily enticed into getting a free credit report, but they actually have to pay for their score.
Oh, I see.
So some protection coming there because they always want you to pay for your score, even though it doesn't really matter what your score is because you're the only one checking it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You need to know what it is, but there's no reason you should pay for it on a consistent basis.
So you've already mentioned the idea of monitoring your credit history. And then, of course, if you find a problem on your credit history, there's got to be the logical next step is you've got to do something about it.
Yes, and lots of things can happen that I've seen in a banker over the past 25 years is that, the mistakes happen. If your social security number is really close to someone else's, or if you happen to have a junior or a senior or a very common name, a lot of times information can be misplaced on your credit report. So it is critical that you go through and follow the formal dispute process that is actually on annualcreditreport.com for each one of those individual reporting agencies.
Experian, TransUnion,
Equifax.
and so on. Equifax. Okay.
And it's not an easy process, I'll tell you that, but it is so worth it. Let me just tell you this story. When my husband and I got married, one of the things that I believe you need to do is you need to check the person's credit score because you're going to marry it.
Okay, I like you. You're good looking, and your credit score sucks, so
That's
we're
right.
done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, think about it. That can be a determining factor of how
Yeah,
much your life is going to cost you,
sure.
whether or not they can get a job, where you're going to live.
Yeah, in fact, it can be significant over time.
And that was going to be my next comment.
Okay.
When my husband and I were getting married, I did pull his credit. Well, he pulled it and let me see it. I did note that there was a collection for $40 from a pager company that he had a dispute with, and out of the principle of the matter, he was not going to pay the $40 because he had closed the contract. He just dead fast.
He didn't feel like he owes it. So, but that's beside the point because it was hurting his credit.
Well, he didn't realize it until we went to buy a home and we were getting a mortgage. And that 0.25 discount that we missed because his credit score was 718 at the bank at the time, the matrix was you had to have a 720 credit score or higher,
Mm-hmm.
and you would get a 0.25 discount. That translated to, at first you think it's only $36 a month,
Yeah.
$450 a year, and ultimately almost $14,000 over the term of that loan.
Okay.
So for $40.
Yeah, a very clear example of making sure that what is on your credit is at least accurate. Now, and we can say that's going to be the case with just about any lender. And the lenders, keep in mind, are going to evaluate the borrowers based on, how they've done in the past. But the reason why the lender's doing it is because they're trying to evaluate how much risk they're taking with that particular loan. So if you've got a person with a poor history as far as making payments, then the bank would look at it and say, okay, yeah, we're going to go ahead and make you the loan, but gosh, we need to be compensated for the risk that we're taking because if you default on it, we're going to get nothing back. So we want to be making a good amount of money right out, through the whole life of the loan. So good credit or bad credit, it affects how much you pay over time.
Exactly.
Obviously.
And if you think about it, let's say that you were a landlord and you owned a rental property.
Yeah.
And somebody came and they wanted to rent an apartment. If you looked at their credit report and you saw that they'd been late on all of their payments,
Right.
and they had defaulted on loans, would you want them to rent an apartment from you because
No.
you know that you may not get paid?
Yeah, not at all. Not a bit.
Your point is well taken, especially with what the banks are going to do. So they may give you the loan, but it will be at a higher price point because if you have a low credit score, you're a higher credit risk.
Well, you've only got about a minute left in this segment, but maybe this is a good time to talk a little bit about the score calculation. First of all, what is the total range of what a score might be?
The range would be from 300 to 850.
300 to 850. The higher is better?
Higher is better. That is exactly what you want.
Okay.
I've never seen an 850. I have seen an 820, but never an 850.
And you've mentioned already saying that your husband's at the time was like 718, but you needed a 720. So what is a good credit score right now in today's world?
It used to be 720, but it really has inched up to 740.
To 740.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Anything over 780, it doesn't really matter.
Well, that's a good jumping off point for the next segment. When we come back, we'll talk about how the credit card company, or actually FICO for all that matters, does the scoring for a credit score. Then, of course, what accounts for each part of that score, how much is made by each part of the score, and so on. Denise Winston joining us from Money Start Here. Making money, I was going to say. Money Start Here. That's moneystarthere.com if you'd like to look up a little bit more. We are Financial Insights. I'm Brian Wiley right here on KIDO AM 63. We'll be right back.